What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Bitcoin Radio for episode 002, WBTC, where Bitcoin lives. I am Joe Blackburn. I am your host. We have a special, awesome guest today. Mr. Jameson Lopp will be in here soon. We've got Galen Danziger joining us. He's the also part of Mousebot. He's CTO. Jameson Lopp, who is our star guest today, he is the CTO of Casa, and he's also been the CTO of BitGo. And it's really cool to have him in. You know, he's one of the early Bitcoin engineers. He recently, in the past year, he was the target of a swatting attack from a either disgruntled or maybe a bad joke gone wrong. But nevertheless, it wasn't much of a joke when things got real. We're going to have a little bit of insight on that. Not to mention, as stated before, he's with Casa right now as a CTO. But he's been an influential developer, and has a pretty strong social presence in this space at this point. You know, he's done really well. He's been probably about as consistent as it gets in principle and ideology. I do appreciate a lot of those ideological principles that he stands by. I share a lot of them with him. It's really unique to find somebody that I agree with just about on everything. And Jameson kind of he fits that bill. I've been able to follow him now for a little bit, but I've really gotten in tune with him ever since I guess it's really been the last year or so that I've really seen his name pop up. And probably the swatting event is what was the first thing that I heard about him about. And then as I started reading some of his stuff, he's got tons of material, everybody. He's been an author of numerous articles, and it's special to have someone with his insight, his experience, and his knowledge overall to sit down and really have a conversation with me. I think that you'll find a lot of relatability. To me, for someone who speaks at such a high level in so many different areas, he also has a really unique way of relating. And I've actually been able to emulate some of that in my presence and in my style. I've seen him and his way and his caring nature, but his discipline in the way that he speaks to people. It's really cool. It's really cool. So we'll have the interview shortly. Again, everybody has to remember, you know, we're on episode 002. I cannot imagine how awesome this is going to get over the next year. Like the outpouring, the support, the amount of people that have touched base and offered, you know, insight on a certain guest that might want to be on. That's what I'm talking about, people. I've really, really seen the community step up. It has been a absolute awesome week. You know, I hope the community is enjoying the Ledger Nano giveaways sponsored by Ledger. Really appreciate them for having some belief in us and seeing us as a group that and a community that is deserving. Also, you know, with Mousebot giving away the Bitcoin, you know, on both parties, Ledger and Mousebot, I'm so thankful for them. You know, Patrick has really gone out of his way to make sure that CCT has seen the love and has been appreciated. And he made that very clear with me early on. So before we get on this interview, special shout out to Ledger. Thanks so much. And obviously Mousebot and Patrick. Galen is representing Mousebot today as their CTO to be on this interview. And I know he's as excited as I am. We'll also, you know, We'll address a lot of things in this interview, but one of the things I really want you to pay attention to is his delivery, and why do you think he's doing this? That was something that, you know, is this guy real? That's kind of how I felt. You know, he says a lot of really great things, and he's experienced a lot. Is this dude for real? Is he really this awesome? You know, that's just my personal, you know, take on how his journey's been, his career. He's done a lot of really cool things. I'm not saying he's perfect, obviously. You know, everybody's human, but goodness gracious, you know, I can say this much. I appreciate when people are real, and that's what you're going to get. One more point to kind of insert is that over the next couple weeks or so, we're going to have some pretty cool interviews. And starting with this one, you know, I really enjoyed having Jeff on episode 1. There was a reason why I wanted Jeff on sitting next to me. I think that, you know, our insight, our perspective is really unique, especially combined. And we've seen about everything you can in social media as far as especially Facebook goes, but there's not much we haven't been exposed to. If you didn't listen to episode 001, I really suggest that you do. Download it, put it on your playlist. It's worth it. All right. So, we're moments away from having, Jameson on. When we get the opportunities to have people like Jameson and you know, I've got some names I'm holding back right now. You know, our executive producer, Josh Donaldson, he's put some things together for us, and he's kicking butt right now. watch us grow, people. Watch how fast this happens. This is good. This is legit. Proud to be sitting next to Mousebelt and Bitcoin Radio in this. And folks, I'm holding my tongue right now just because that's how you're supposed to do it. All right, let's get out of this part. Let's head straight into Jameson. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Here we go. All right, Bitcoin Radio. We're finally here. We have Jameson Lopp joining us. Jameson is a early Bitcoin engineer. He really recently in this past year, I think most people would have probably heard about his swatting incident. I know that's where I first heard his name. But among many different things, he is the CTO of current CTO of Casa, has been the CTO for BitGo. Jameson, what's up, man? Welcome to Bitcoin Radio.
Hey, good to be here. It's always funny to be referred to as an early Bitcoin anything, because I think we're all early.
Hey, that's the truth, man. With us today, we also have Galen Danziger. He's the CTO of Mousebelt. Galen, what's going on, man?
Oh, hey, Joe. Doing pretty good here.
Awesome. Well, Jameson, you kind of have this aura around you. You have a unique way of talking to people, I think, in the space that I find really, it's just really endearing. I've watched a lot of your stuff. I've read some of your articles. You seem to attract people because of you're so relatable in the way that you speak about things that, I find myself emulating that, trying to be more like you, especially for the new people coming into the space. And, I think that goes back to the amount of time you've been in the space. You don't have a big ego, at least, publicly. And of course, privately, I mean, we don't know each other very well, but I assume it'd probably be very similar to that. But we'll kind of jump right into, what it was your inspiration for even this whole thing about crypto. What inspired you about blockchain early on?
Early on, I got into it for two different reasons. The first one being that I'm a computer scientist, and upon reading the white paper, I found that Bitcoin was a very elegant solution to a problem that I had never really given much thought to. And simultaneously, I had already run the gamut of the political spectrum, growing up extremely conservative in a Southern household, then going to a liberal university, and then eventually getting out of college and turning more libertarian. And so at that point in time in my life, getting into the libertarian ideology, I found it was also very interesting from that standpoint. And the idea that I could combine my ability to essentially code my own will and sort of project my thoughts and my ideology via programming to try to kind of change the world, to reshape various aspects of the world was incredibly powerful and intriguing to me.
Bro, you are speaking my language. I've never heard anybody put it out there so normal. That was wonderfully said. And I share a lot of those same concepts and same things that you just mentioned. I guess even with the swatting incident, which was less than a year ago still, I guess that was November of last year, right, Jameson?
Well, it was 2017, so I think we're coming up on 2 years, yeah.
Okay, yeah, my bad. You know how the crypto years kind of squished together there, but absolutely. So you have this experience with the swatting. Actually, let's just tell that story a little bit. Why don't you tell everybody kind of the basics of what happened that day?
Well, I have the almost minute-by-minute breakdown in very long-form format on my blog, but essentially I was out and working at the gym and come home to find that I'm not allowed into my own neighborhood. And why was that? Well, it turned out there was an active shooter situation going on, and so the police basically said I needed to stay out of my own neighborhood and that I should tell anyone else I knew in the neighborhood to get out as soon as possible. And so I did that, and it didn't take long before we found out that my significant other comes out of my house and gets stopped by the police, who basically interrogate and say, hey, is everything okay? And of course, within a matter of about 30 seconds, it was very obvious to everyone involved that this had been a hoax. Essentially, the police had been called, and someone claiming to be me had said that they had murdered people and were holding people hostage, and that's why they locked down my whole neighborhood. They also claimed to have explosives and other weapons, and so it was thankfully about as good as it could have been,
Sure.
and along the lines of that nobody got hurt, and they actually did not, break down my door or anything like a lot of swatting incidents.
Sure.
And that was only because I was not at home at the time, and I actually, became aware of what was going on and was able to call my house and say, hey, everybody needs to get out. So it was, a fortuitous set of circumstances, but ultimately it ended up, I think, being a result of the fact that I had become more of a public figure, and sometimes I say things that may piss off people for one reason or another, and I just pissed off the wrong person who happened to have the ability to make anonymous phone calls. And that's really what this entire situation revealed to me, was that there are exploits that our government has unwittingly created, I think, as a result of trying to be helpful. There are ways for people to send anonymous tips and essentially use government forces to target whoever they want to. And my specific example was the creation of this false hostage situation and homicide. But in the past couple of years since that happened to me, I've actually heard of a number of different incidents where Bitcoiners and prominent people have had various agencies used against them, for example, like Child Protective Services or even the ATF.
For sure.
And it's just an interesting new dynamic that has resulted from some of these anonymizing and privacy technologies.
Well, Jameson, first off, fortunately, like you said, that situation does sound like it was resolved as good as it possibly could have been, given the circumstances and what they were saying, especially because I have actually listened to that recording that was saved. One of the first times I ever heard about you was due to the circumstance. And of course, at the time, I didn't necessarily, have the opportunity to just call you or reach out to you. We're just now getting a chance to meet each other. And but I felt for you, man. I couldn't imagine pulling up to my neighborhood and the cops just being like, yeah, there's an active shooter. Your first instinct, I'm just sitting there thinking about my family, making sure. Then come to find out they're talking about me. And I'm like, oh, dude, just to put myself in your chair there, I feel for you, bro. And I'm impressed of how, I can tell by your demeanor now, but how calmly it seems like you were able to make sure that situation did not get worse. Now, moving into like the next step of this was this kind of social experiment. That, at least that's how the media portrayed it. I would love to hear your take on this, obviously, but you went off the grid, man. And I guess it was was it not the New York Times that wrote the article that kind of explained how you did this and what you did to kind of allow yourself to really, and they say off the grid, but I don't even know if that's the right word for it. It's kind of like just changing everything, about your life to not be tracked. How would you just put this into your words?
Yeah, off the grid isn't quite the best way to describe it, because I would say if you're really going off the grid, then you're going completely dark and you're cutting off contact, or at least you're not using
Into
your
the wild
name.
stuff.
Yeah, and so I'm actually taking what I believe is the more challenging path, where I'm trying to still continue my outreach and continue to use the reputation that I have built in order to spread my ideas. But I'm trying to do it in a way where these people cannot target me anonymously and use various resources of government agencies to screw with me, and really, and it's not even just targeting via government agencies. Some of the things that people can do, if they know how to get the right information, they can basically screw with anything that has your name on it, like your credit card accounts, your deed to your house, your utilities. They can basically
Cell phones.
Yeah, they can pose as you and turn off or take over any number of accounts and essential pieces to your day-to-day life. And so I wanted to prevent people from basically being able to grief me like that. And as a result, I figured out both legal and technical ways to essentially shield myself from the rest of the world. And so I'm using proxies of all kinds. I'm using internet proxies to shield my internet traffic. I'm using legal proxies through various entities, corporations and trusts, to basically own my property so that my name is not on any public records. And it's really required a very major change in my day-to-day life, though after doing it for over a year now, you start to get used to it. It's just new routines, new reactions to certain things.
Sure.
And once again, I have an extremely long, in-depth blog post on my website. I believe it's entitled "A Modest Privacy Protection Proposal" for anyone who actually wants to know all the dirty details of everything that I had to do. But the short version is I had to burn down my entire life. Like, I had been living in the same house for 10 years, and my address was probably in hundreds, if not thousands, of databases.
Jameson, real quick, let me ask you this. Like, what would you say your digital footprint was prior to you recognizing this? Would you say that you were already moderately prepared for keeping your privacy, like, I guess, just away from, keeping it your own? Or did you not even think about it at all? You just kind of grew up in this digital age where, clearly you were involved at some point in the beginning of Bitcoin. And as you move forward, I know that with the types of company that you kept, you're a developer, you're a tech guy, right? And so privacy is part of that world. What would you say that digital footprint was before this?
Oh, it was huge. It was no different from probably, any other person in their 20s
Sure.
or 30s who has grown up with all of this technology. It's hard to even understand the full scope of it, which is why trying to clean up what was out there was outside of the realm of possibility, and basically why I had to start over, get a blank slate, and then very meticulously decide what data I wanted to create in the first place.
Sure. And I saw like I said, there's also a New York Times article that kind of briefly overviews these steps, but clearly it wasn't written as simple as they've made it. Although they did annotate on their article that it was not so easy for you. But what would you say was the biggest challenge out of all those steps? What was the hardest part?
It was mostly the legal stuff. Like, I had to pay some pretty major legal bills for these attorneys to basically investigate what was possible and investigate what the local jurisdictions would allow them to do in order to set up entities that could then take ownership of houses and vehicles and really any publicly registered property. That was the most difficult from a resource standpoint, in the sense that, it cost tens of thousands of dollars in legal bills, and then maybe another $1,000 or so per year.
Sure.
In actual fees for maintaining the various entities. On the personal side, though, the trickier thing would just have to be creating my alter ego, my new pseudonym. Basically,
You're Rusty Shackelford.
It's in my new location. My neighbors don't know my real name. Like, really, no one that I interact in my new location knows my new name. They only know me by my pseudonym.
Do you still use that name now? That pseudonym?
Yeah, so that is basically my pseudonym for any like real world interaction where I live. And when I'm traveling, of course, I use my regular name and people know who I am, but only when I'm going to like crypto specific events.
So I literally have to pretend like I'm a stranger, walk up to you, and that's the only way I'll get to know your other not real name.
Yeah, anyone who I meet during just normal day-to-day life now, they get my pseudonym and a very generic background story of,
Sure.
yeah, I'm a software engineer. I work with like network security.
I would love to even that part of you, Jameson, is still probably really interesting. Even like the parts that is just basic. I would still like to have that conversation as not Jameson, as neighbor.
Well, I still have all of my other hobbies. I'm still interested in firearms and hand-to-hand combat and personal defense and security. Absolutely. And all this other stuff. I don't mention the fact that I'm into crypto.
Yep, I understand completely, and we have a lot of the same interests. I can assure you of that. All right, so we can move a little bit past that, and we can talk about a little bit what you're doing now in the history. And Galen, I know you have some questions about this side of things, but why don't you give us a brief background on BitGo and Casa and really anything else that might fit into that if you want to, Jameson.
Yeah, so it was somewhat fortuitous that as my interest in Bitcoin progressed, I started my own open source project where I forked Bitcoin Core and added in a bunch of metrics, basically trying to add in some of the DevOps analysis that I had been doing in my normal day-to-day job. And about a year after doing that, decided that, I was already spending so much time thinking about this space that I might as well try to get paid to do it. And that was right around early 2015. A lot of venture capital was coming in and there were more jobs actually available. So I applied at a few places and was lucky that there was a software engineering spot open at BitGo, and it was not advertised as a remote engineering position, and they didn't have any remote engineers, but was able to get my foot in the door due to the side projects I had been working on, and somewhat as a result of my tweets as well.
Sure.
And that just turned into me going down the rabbit hole of learning all about running enterprise infrastructure and learning a lot more about the security side of things, both just regular cybersecurity and private key management security. So I did that for 3 years, and it was definitely an interesting learning experience. Lots of frustrations because we were servicing mostly exchanges and other large service providers, and they had very high demands for uptime and reliability and whatnot. And eventually I managed to get a sort of cold call from Jeremy Welch, who happened to be a Duke alum, and I was living near Duke back then and actually helping out with some courses at Duke. And he came to pitch me, and I had received many pitches before, but he basically pitched me a vision of what I thought the ultimate, personal wallet would be like. And so this was something that I felt like I myself would want to use, and I felt there was a huge need for it, and that I would, benefit from it and be interested enough to actually work on it myself. So switched over from really doing some multi-sig enterprise security to doing multi-sig personal private key security. So it really was a very small pivot. And I
What
felt
year was that when that started?
so that was just a little over a year ago, early 2018.
Okay.
And, we've been moving along pretty fast since then. And what started out as just the key master and key management product has turned into this whole suite of products that are starting to get integrated together and really becoming a much stronger, user-friendly suite of products.
Absolutely. So BitGo and Casa are probably the two companies that most people are going to associate you with. How much do you think BitGo played into your influence of Casa and what you're developing over there?
Well, I definitely learned a lot of best practices while I was working at BitGo. So, I've been able to reuse a lot of that knowledge. And also, I had the opportunity to meet with a lot of the big players in the space, a lot of the people who are actually building these large scale services that need to have secure products, and probably one of the more interesting experiences it's not really something that you can learn from a book is that I got to see a variety of situations where users managed to shoot themselves in the foot.
Sure.
And so that became one of our primary focuses at Casa, was this user experience of trying to build in enough guardrails to make it as difficult as possible for the user to shoot themselves in the foot, because in this space, if that happens, it can be catastrophic, and in many cases, no one can help you.
Absolutely.
Okay, and Jameson, I actually have a question for you, sort of in the realm of swatting as well. So you had a bunch of armed people in your house, and now you're building this product where you're personally managing your keys. How do you go from having a bunch of armed people in your house, people knowing your address that could get access to your wallet, to building like a personal wallet instead of like a enterprise custody system?
Yeah, well, technically they didn't make it into the house, but they certainly could have if they had wanted to, or if something had gone differently. So, for practical purposes, my house was compromised. And so that really shows that you should not have a single point of failure. I mean, you should not be keeping all of the eggs to your private key basket in one place, even if it's your like highly fortified house. It really comes down to what is your threat model, and I think in a lot of cases you might say, hey, you should basically have your threat model be the nation state. And the average person will just look at you and laugh and say, oh, you're just paranoid. But, in my case, I actually did have agents of the state who were posing a threat to me, not because I had not done anything to threaten them, but apparently there are cases where you can be targeted even though you're not actually causing a threat. So there are so many unknowns out there. Like, this is not really something that I had thought would be an issue I would have to deal with. But if we're talking about not only the security of your setup, but also the robustness of your setup to loss, because I think that may in fact be a bigger problem in this space of people just having something unexpected, something crazy happen that causes destruction of data, then we really do need to build systems that are not just secure enough that we feel reasonably comfortable that they aren't going to fail. We need to build systems that are 10 times more secure and robust than we think is reasonable, because we want to be able to handle those crazy edge cases.
Jameson, like, let's be real. If you ever found this dude that swatted you, you're going to kick this dude's ass, and I'll help you. Not that you need the help, but I cannot believe this story, man. Like, it still blows my mind just like hearing you and hearing how calm you are and how reasonable you explain these things. I can't imagine what was going through your mind at that moment, especially when you found that out. I mean, any idea, has anybody ever come forward with admittance, or has anybody, told you who it was?
Actually, yes.
Is this public? Maybe I missed this, because that's awesome if you found out who it was.
It's not public.
Did you kick his ass?
So the problem, if you read my blog post about the swatting, you'll notice that I post a $100,000 bounty for information that leads to the arrest and conviction of the perpetrator.
Sure.
And I have received from multiple sources, multiple anonymous sources, information that all points to the same person. But unfortunately, there's a problem with the information in that it's all just hearsay, and there's nothing hard enough to hand over to law enforcement to essentially result in arrest and conviction. And so while I could try to screw with this person, I think that the whole thing was basically a prank done in poor taste, and it's not even really worth my time trying to pursue. So I am happy that I'm in a position now where I don't have to worry about similar people doing the same thing. But I don't think that revenge is really going to help anything.
Fair.
And I suspect that this person is not going to be living an amazing life in the first place, just based upon the other activities that I'm told that they're involved in. Karma is going to catch up with them eventually.
And also in that neck of the woods, like you, just them knowing that sometimes is enough indication. And I could bet that you might find some peace of mind if he knows that too, at least at some point. But nevertheless, a technician and a gentleman. Good on you, Jameson. I'm very impressed with your calmness, as I've noted before. Okay, so we'll move into this next question that we have, and I guess it kind of goes into where Casa is at the moment and what your expectations are. But before I really get into that part, some statements that you've made in the past have been how much the blockchain industry has to change or how much it's going to change. And if you could kind of give us at least a just an outline about what you mean by when you say it's going to drastically change over the next few years, where is it that you see these pinch points are, and what do you think is the reason why these huge changes are coming?
Well, there are several issues that need to be addressed if we really want to get to mainstream adoption. I would say that right now we're at, you could possibly call it mainstream acceptance or mainstream familiarity, in the sense that people have heard of Bitcoin and they at least understand that it is something that you can buy and sell and basically use like a currency.
Sure.
But if we want to get to the point where people are actually using it, then it needs to be easy enough that it doesn't require hours or even days of learning, of basically scaling this mountain of knowledge, if you're going to be able to secure your own private keys and really take advantage of the ultimate level of self-sovereignty that the system is providing. We don't want to get to mainstream adoption by just creating banking 2.0, where everybody is buying on Coinbase or some exchange and then just leaving it there and basically, having a third party be the custodian for all of their money, because
just recreating what we have.
Yeah, that would be recreating what we have, with the only real improvement being the fact that the monetary supply can't be inflated on a whim.
Sure.
So
absolutely.
If we want to be able to have this usability, and of course the scalability is another major point that is still being addressed, then we need to have a lot more really layers of software abstraction built on top of the protocols. And that means on top of not just Bitcoin, but on top of Lightning as well, because we've learned a lot about Lightning at Casa from selling and running these nodes for almost a year now. And there's still a lot that needs to be shoved under the hood, basically. The way that I put it is that, like, as long as people, or as long as the average user needs to actually understand like the difference between on-chain Bitcoin and off-chain Lightning, or as long as the average user needs to actually be exposed to the fact that there are these things called channels and that, you have to manage liquidity in the channels and yada, yada, then it's only going to remain basically a project that is used by nerds and hobbyists who are technical or have the wherewithal to put in a lot of time to figure it out. And so that's why I think that you're still going to see a lot more innovation to come, where we basically figure out how we can continue to build smarter software that builds all of these best practices into the software, so that it really is as easy as, signing up for Facebook or Uber or what have you. It's like it needs to be as easy as using a mobile app where you can just click through and follow the instructions, and you don't have to RTFM, as they say, yep. Because the user is not going to read any instruction manuals, no matter how much time you put into it. That's another thing that I've definitely learned over my software career. Seeing a lot of great documentation written and then get completely ignored.
Yeah, that was me. I apologize for that. No, I think that's pretty much human nature. People are just lazy when it comes to that. But beautiful explanation there, Jameson. Galen, I know you had some thoughts on these ideas and some of this ideology.
Yeah, no, I remember the first time that I was setting up a multi-signature wallet. It was a friend and I had got a little bit more money in a transaction than we were used to. We're thinking, well, maybe we shouldn't have a single point of failure. We're trying to set it up, and after a little over an hour of trying to figure out exactly how it might work, we ended up just using a regular wallet that first time and it later. So I felt that same UX trouble, especially with multi-signature stuff. So what exactly are you doing at Casa to help that? Like what types of UX things are you working into this?
Yeah, so on the key management side, what we're really trying to do is meld the level of security that you get from these dedicated key management devices like the Ledger and Trezor and Cold Card. And we're trying to merge that into the usability of a mobile app. So if you're using Casa Keymaster, we are basically allowing you to very easily visualize what your multi-sig setup is, manage your devices, your keys, and instead of requiring the user to back up and manage their seed phrases for these things, because that's essentially your private keys, we believe that it is in fact a much better user experience to create a more flexible type of multi-signature setup where we call it the seedless setup, but you initialize your hardware devices, plug them in, get your key shield set up in our app, and then if something happens, basically some sort of catastrophe, some sort of theft or loss, where in a regular scenario, the user would then have to go dig up their seed phrase and reconstitute that particular set of keys on a new device. We instead provide a wizard inside of the app where you just click on your device and you say, I need to replace this device. You go buy a new one off the shelf or from us or whatever, plug it in, and we walk you through the process of essentially doing a key rotation in the wallet. And so we think that, just creating the ability for users to click through and do what is under the hood an extremely complex operation of sweeping all the UTXOs and creating a transaction to sign them over to a new set of keys is both a lot more user-friendly and ultimately a lot more secure, because we can prevent the need for the user to be handling this private key data in the first place. And there's just an entire mountain of knowledge under the simple phrase that a lot of these devices tell you when you set them up, which is, here is your seed phrase, write it down and keep it safe. And there's so much both IT knowledge and security knowledge required to do that correctly. We think it's easier if you can just completely bypass it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's really cool. So I know you got, for the key management, I see that you have like two major offerings. You have a 2 of 3 multi-signature and a 3 of 5 multi-signature. And you're offering them both, it looks like, just for individual users. Can you elaborate like a little bit more on how those work, who might want to use it, why they need to use it?
Yeah, so we have a number of different tiers. We do have a single signature basically mobile key wallet, which, you should probably only keep like a few $100s on for your day-to-day spending. But for the actual like secure vault style products, the 2 of 3 is kind of our entry level, basically having one hardware device that is protecting one set of keys, and then another set of keys in cold storage that Casa has and is only used for disaster recovery situations. And then finally, you always have a key set on your actual mobile device, which is encrypted via the secure element that is available in your mobile phone hardware. And that initial like 2 of 3 multi-sig, we recommend anywhere from like $1,000 to maybe $10,000 or $100,000 worth. It kind of makes sense for that level of funds to keep secured, because you've got a better level of redundancy than just having one seed phrase or one hardware device in your house or in a bank vault or whatever, because even bank vaults can have things go wrong. And having a little bit more diversity of keeping these things geographically separated is really what gives you an improved level of security and robustness against both theft and loss scenarios. But of course, if you're securing a much larger amount of money, hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, then you're going to want to have even a greater level of robustness. And that's when people will be more interested in doing a 3 of 5 setup, because with that, you can actually lose 2 different devices at the same time and still be able to recover. And some of the extreme scenarios of people who really are thinking about like nation state level attacks, they may go so far as to put some of the devices in different countries or different jurisdictions to prevent various legal threats against them. And while these products are mostly developed for the individual, we do have what we call the diamond tier, which is a 3 of 5 multi-sig product that is also multi-user. And that is a type of setup that can make sense for something like a family office or a small hedge fund, where you have maybe 2 or 3 people who are managing a single wallet.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Galen.
Yeah, so I think that's a really cool product setup. So I do know BitGo also offers a multi-signature product. Can you elaborate on the differences between Casa and BitGo?
Yeah, so BitGo, well, BitGo has multiple products as well. They also have a custodial product now, which is more targeted towards like the institutional investors. But the multi-sig product that BitGo has been touting all along is a 2 of 3 setup. And in that setup, you have one key that is held by the user, usually on a hot server of some type. You then have one key that is held by BitGo, also semi-hot, like it's on a computer. It's secured by various security modules, but it is used actively to co-sign transactions. And then you have a third key that is either held by the user in their own cold storage setup or held by yet another third party as a key recovery service. The idea being that you have a level of robustness there that BitGo could cease to exist and you can still recover your funds. But the biggest difference is the fact that the key that BitGo is holding is being actively used, and in a normal transaction signing flow, BitGo is going to co-sign the transaction. Now, the powerful thing there, and the reason why this makes a lot of sense for enterprises, is that BitGo then has a fairly complex policy engine that each user can customize to basically put in their own security policies. And this can be anything from whitelists and blacklists of IP addresses or crypto addresses. It can be things like velocity limits, time of day type things. Basically, anything that you, the user in BitGo, can come up with. It's possible to create rules here, and this is basically like an Oracle style setup, except the Oracle is BitGo rather than some like smart contract that's running on a blockchain on its own. And it definitely provides a much better level of security than just running a single signature hot wallet for whatever your service is. But if you're going for cold storage level security, there's still some potential failure scenarios there. So at Casa, while we do have one of the keys, it is never on an internet connected computer. It's not actively used for signing transactions. We don't have any sort of co-signing engine that is actively used. We would only ever actually sign with the Casa key after going through a fairly lengthy process that usually has a several day waiting period and a variety of verifications that go on. And it's really only meant to be used for disaster recovery. So I think that, both of these systems have their own good use cases, and it doesn't necessarily make sense to see the two as competitors, even though we are offering similar multi-sig M of N models.
That's a good point. No, and I appreciate that, Jameson. Galen, great questions, man. I'm glad that you infused those. Jameson, look, man, I know that your time is precious, so we won't hold you up much longer. I do have a couple more things I want to ask you. I'm going to do my quick fire with you real quick. I hope you're quick on your feet, Jameson, because I'm coming fast. You ready?
Ready.
What's your favorite movie of all time?
Primer.
Ooh, nice. Okay. Bitcoin as a political party, yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Favorite moment in crypto?
I think the most touching moment was when the $1 million fundraiser spur of the moment for Andreas Antonopoulos occurred a couple of years ago.
That's a great answer, by the way. I love that. Most people are like, oh, when it hit 10,000, blah, blah, blah. No, that's legit. All right. Best technical mind or maybe your hero in the blockchain space?
I have to go with Peter Wille.
Fair. Favorite personality in the space?
Ooh. If we're going for outgoing personalities, I'd probably have to go with Max Kaiser.
Okay, cool. For a second, I thought you were going to say Roger Ver. Just kidding. All right. Fake Toshi or real Toshi?
Totally fake Toshi.
Fair. I almost said his name, but I'd rather not. Completely agree. All right. Well, great answers. I think those were really good questions. I'm glad that you were quick too. Some people are like, oh, I don't know, this person, that person. You did well there. All right, Jameson, any last words for us, man?
Well, the thing that I usually close with is that the best thing that you can invest in this space is education.
Oh, well, I can appreciate that. Galen, I appreciate your time today as well. Thanks for bringing your questions in. And look, Bitcoin Radio, the cryptoverse, it belongs to all of us. This is where Bitcoin lives, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.